As a racing content creator, these are the most difficult videos to make because I think while we were all very relieved to hear that Ryan Newman has non-life-threatening but serious injuries from his crash on the last lap of the Daytona 500 last night, it doesn't change the fact that a man is laying in a hospital bed right now with serious injuries from one of the most horrific stock car racing accidents that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Now, because of that, we need to have a very serious discussion about the culture in NASCAR racing right now, because I believe this accident was absolutely, if not preventable, I don't think NASCAR did a good enough job of risk management to avoid situations where drivers would find themselves in these sorts of predicaments. Now, this video is not going to be for the faint of heart. We are talking about subject matter which involves a very serious auto racing crash. And you're going to see footage. You're going to hear things that may be uncomfortable for you right after this tragedy. So, that's your warning. I understand that a lot of people are going to cope with this in different ways. So I want to be as understanding of that as possible. But at the same time, I really do feel like we need to talk about this because it is very important, and I really do believe and will advocate that NASCAR needs to make some serious changes, take a long, hard look at themselves and the product that they are currently presenting and how it affects the drivers, the fans, the crews, and everyone involved from a safety standpoint. So let's read the statement, the official statement that came out last night from Roush Fenway Racing, and then we'll get into it. Ryan Newman is being treated at Halifax Medical Center. He is in serious conditions, but doctors have indicated his injuries are not life-threatening. We appreciate your thoughts and prayers and ask that you respect the privacy of Ryan and his family at this time. We appreciate your patience and cooperation and will provide more information as it becomes available. Now, at the time of this recording, that is all that we know about the condition of Ryan Newman. And while, again, it is fantastic news to know that his injuries are non-life-threatening, that is a very broad brushstroke. And I saw a lot of people last night claiming that Ryan Newman is okay. And I think that is a bit of an overstatement, to be honest with you, for the simple fact of, number one, he is in serious condition. This is not, again, I don't want to speculate on the condition, but I will put it this way. If the family is asking for privacy, I'll let you fill in the blanks about the severity of the actual situation facing Ryan Newman. I think it's going to be a long recovery, one way or another. And while thankfully he did not lose his life, I do not think that this makes the situation any less tragic. I mean, this is a tragedy. Ryan Newman is an underappreciated driver. He's got Hall of Fame numbers. He was the 1999 USAC Silver Crown champion. He earned his name Rocket Man for his incredible 2003 season where he had 11 wins and 11 poles and 8 wins. 2013 Brickyard 400 winner, and of course he has the 2008 Daytona 500 on his resume. So this is, this hurts. It hurts when any driver is put in such a situation. But when you're looking at a driver who has this incredible legacy, he has 649 career consecutive starts. I mean, there are people alive who right now who watch NASCAR who have never known a NASCAR not to have Ryan Newman in the race. And unless there's some sort of a miracle, that is something that people are going to have to deal with. And, and this is something that I think a lot of people definitely got a wake-up call last night because NASCAR has not had to deal with this for a while. That doesn't change the fact, unfortunately, that Fox, I don't think, handled the situation very well. Their coverage disappointed me quite a bit. Now, I'm not one of those people who says replays of serious or fatal accidents should not be shown. I am not one that thinks that you should not face reality, but I think you should provide the proper context before you show anything or have super close-ups on an accident scene or a serious rescue effort. So I mean, I think the biggest thing was the close-up, slow motion. That shouldn't have been on the air at the time where the driver was not extricated from the vehicle yet, and there was no real credible information about his condition. Now, I'm going to give you this disclaimer: you're about to see that same footage. We are going to show the accident because I think it's important in the context of this discussion for you to see it and understand what happened. But I will put a time code down here in case you want to skip that, don't want to watch that. I totally understand. But here we go. Here is the accident in full and exactly what happened. So last lap of the Daytona 500, you have pushing for the lead between Hamlin and Blaney and Newman. Blaney gets into the back of Newman. Newman goes into the wall and then is hit right on the cockpit, driver's side, driver's window by Corey LaJoie. The car flies up into the air, lands once again, catching on fire. Somehow, miraculously, the fuel tank, which appeared to rupture, did not ignite it as well, but it was a very long extrication process between the time of the accident and getting him to Halifax Medical Center. So obviously, from a perspective of cup racing, I think this is the most serious and high-profile accident since Dale Earnhardt's death in the Daytona 500 20 years ago. And I will give NASCAR a lot of credit, at least in the initial reaction to that wreck with Dale Earnhardt. From a pure safety standpoint, the car of tomorrow, which debuted in 2007, was an incredibly safe race car. It upped the standards of NASCAR racing and the safety aspects of those cars immeasurably. I think everybody always cites the Michael McDowell crash at Texas as one that would have been unsurvivable in a Gen 4 car, and I think that was really good of NASCAR to do. They've really set the safety aspect of the cars up. Unfortunately, here's where some of the cultural problems begin. And this is tough to say because this is tough criticism. It's going to be tough to hear. But I think NASCAR overestimated their car strength. I think they overestimated how much of an impact a driver could survive or survive without being seriously injured. And you've seen that kind of demonstrated in especially the last couple of years, but really you can go back quite a ways to specifically, I remember the Have At It Boys rule, which was one where NASCAR purposely stopped policing or enforcing any kind of punishment on drivers for taking out their grievances on their competitors on the racetrack. You began to see intentional accidents like the one involving Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski at Atlanta. And unfortunately, it's really continued on from there. You cannot have a Saturday night short track dirt race that generally takes place at 50 to 70 miles an hour where the drivers are going to act crazy. You can't have Bowman Gray at 200 miles an hour, and that's what NASCAR has tried to accomplish, I think, in the last few years. They kind of understood what happened in 2001 to them with the death of Dale Earnhardt, and they kind of didn't at the same time, because it was like two steps forward and one back. They built incredibly safe race cars. They stepped up they reduced the likelihood of an accident taking a life or even injuring a driver by a significant amount. But what they've also done with so many of their changes in recent years has increased the amount of accidents, contact, cars getting into the wall, cars getting airborne tremendously by things like the green-white checker precedent. This is something that I'm going to talk about later, but having a green white checker at all encourages drivers to go absolutely crazy, even when you're coming up on the end of regulation, because if there's a crash and you're not involved in it, well, you've got another chance to win the race. And especially doing unlimited green white checkers or having multiple attempts, that is something that has encouraged a lot of this crazy racing and wrecking that we have seen in recent years. Going to more blatant examples, you look at the caution clock. Throwing an arbitrary yellow, for what reason? For what purpose? Same for the stages. When you're throwing a mandatory caution, what is the reason? And many of you are going to say entertainment, and I'm going to look you right in the eye and ask you to tell me, what does entertainment mean in that context? I think you know the answer. It means more wrecks. I mean, even things like double file restarts, and that's probably unpopular to point out, but what do double file restarts tend to lead to more than single file restarts? So you look at so many of these changes, and what have the end result been? It has been more accidents, a higher percentage, a higher frequency of accidents. And it's not, and this goes kind of back to the Fox thing as well. You have not only NASCAR, but the media partners willing to glorify wrecks. Tell me how many times you saw or have seen Brendan Gaughan's flip from last year at Talladega in any kind of promotional material involving NASCAR. They've used it a lot. That was a scary looking crash, and it was one, that NASCAR promotes. And they're setting an expectation, they and both NASCAR and the media partners, that is going to happen every race. And if it doesn't happen, if the fans don't get a green flag finish, and I'm guilty of this too, I'm not going to pretend to sit on a high horse, but if you don't get a green flag finish, or they throw a yellow halfway around the track, you get mad. You say, oh, well, they could have run to the green. And here's the unfortunate thing about this, is that had NASCAR been as consistently inconsistent as they usually are, throwing a yellow for Chase Elliott getting wrecked going into turn one, the result would have been the same. Denny Hamlin would have been the Daytona 500 winner, but the difference would have been that Ryan Newman would not be in a hospital bed with serious injuries right now. So there needs to be a very, very hard look taken by everyone at NASCAR about some of these policies, because you just cannot. 200-mile-an-hour superspeedway racing is not the circus. It's not professional wrestling. It's not a controlled environment. You cannot control it. It is something that is incredibly dangerous. There is an inherent danger, inherent risk to auto racing. You can build the safest car in the entire world, but when you're racing at speeds over 140 miles an hour, you're racing at speeds that airplanes take off at. That's also the speed that airplanes can crash at. If you've ever seen an airplane crash, they're not pretty. So you're messing with forces that are completely out of your control anytime you step in a very fast race car, especially when you're talking 200 miles an hour. And you can change the cars all you want. You can change the package all you want. But that risk is always going to be there. You don't want to have a racing product that encourages accidents. I mean, I said this back in 2018 when Eric Almirola was wrecked by Austin Dillon for the Daytona 500 win. This was only going to escalate to the point where somebody got hurt. Somebody is now sitting in a hospital bed because of this. So what needs to change? Specifically right now, I think at the very least, for tracks over a mile, green-white checkers should go away completely. The race should run to its advertised distance. That should be the end of it. Maybe you can do it on the short tracks. Maybe it is safer to do it where the speeds are under 100 miles an hour. But any place that you're getting toward 150 all the way up to 210 miles an hour, you should not do the green-white checker. It just encourages bad things to happen. The other thing I would say is I think you should do away with the stage cautions. I think it's a bad look to be throwing intentional cautions that, let's be honest, have the consequence, intended or not, to create more caution. I mean, cautions breed cautions is like the John 3:16 of NASCAR. So if you're throwing an intentional caution, what do you actually expect is going to happen? And the final thing is, I think that if there's a crash, NASCAR should just throw a yellow. Just throw a yellow. Be consistent. If there's a crash, throw a yellow. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that Ryan Newman is okay. The second most important thing is that this never happens again, or that at least NASCAR takes all of the appropriate action to make sure that this is not something that has a very high possibility to happen again. They have to make sure that, number one, the drivers, the fans, the crew members are safe. And I do not believe, and I've said this before, and I think maybe I've left it unsaid too much, but I think in a lot of ways, what many of us traditional fans have against the gimmicks is that they encourage this type of behavior. They encourage these type of wrecks to happen. They encourage things like the longest Daytona 500 ever ending in a horrific accident that was, quite frankly, unnecessary, because if the race had ended at 500 miles, or even if it had ended after the first green white checker, Denny Hamlin still would have won the race. So what was accomplished? I guess the closest finish in Daytona 500 history, or the second closest finish. At what cost? You got what you wanted. You got an exciting finish. But you also got a man in the hospital. And the sad thing is, based on their most recent track record, I have a feeling that what NASCAR is going to do is they are going to just reduce the speed of the cars at the plate tracks, possibly the 1.5 milers, find a way to zap the horsepower even more, and then they're going to get confused as to why the racing got so bad, and then they'll add another stage caution, because they have not done anything to make me think that they are self-aware enough to realize they've taken a few too many steps too far, trying to stage some exciting moments, which ultimately, let's face it, are really just trying to set up cars to crash into each other to get some casual eyeballs on the sport. But unfortunately, and maybe fortunately in some ways, casuals are not going to be able to kind of be brushed away in this sense. I think in 2001 with Dale Earnhardt, you might have been able to tell a casual fan, hey, that was a unique circumstance. That'll never happen again. We've got Hans devices now. We've got way stronger cars. That'll never happen again. You can't show me, or any kind of a casual fan, a car getting T-boned in the driver's window at 200 miles an hour, and then tell that fan that was a freak accident and that'll never happen again. Because the violence of that accident, I think, tells everything you need to know. So that's it, man. I really hope and pray that the NASCAR changes their ways. I hope they take this as the wake-up call that it is. And if Austin Dillon wasn't a wake-up call, this certainly should be. Please just treat your product like a sport, like the sport that can kill somebody. It is. Let's accept that. I don't think we've accepted that for a while. Or at least some people haven't. They've been blissfully ignorant. Please. It's a sport that is dangerous, inherently dangerous, and you're never going to be able to eliminate it completely, no matter what car you're racing. It's always going to be there. Thank God Ryan Newman is alive, and his family will hopefully see him make a full and speedy recovery. I think that's it.